1. The word of the Lord came to Hosea, son of Beeri, during the reign of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam, son of Joash, king of Israel. When the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, "Go marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her. For like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord." So he married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to Hosea, "Call him Jezreel, because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. In that day I will break Israel's bow in the valley of Jezreel." Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. Then the Lord said to Hosea, "Call her Lo Ruhamah, which means not loved. For I will no longer show love to Israel, that I should at all forgive them. Yet I will show love to Judah, and I will save them, not by bow, sword, or battle, or by horses or horsemen, but I, the Lord their God, will save them." After she had weaned Lo Ruhamah, Gomer had another son. Then the Lord said, "Call him Lo Ami, which means not my people. For you are not my people, and I am not your God. Yet the Israelites will be like the sand on the seashore, which cannot be measured or counted. In the place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' they will be called children of the living God. The people of Judah and the people of Israel will come together. They will appoint one leader and will come up out of the land, for great will be the day of Jezreel." This is the word of the Lord. Please be seated.
Hello, everyone, and once again, welcome to Hope East Village. My name is Jordan. I'm one of the pastors here, and it's a gift to be with you today. Today, we are actually starting a new series. We'll actually spend the next six weeks looking at this series. It's called Major Truths from Minor Prophets. I have a spelling typo up there. It happens. Major Truths from Minor Prophets. I love this. I love this section of scripture, mostly because the name really tickles me. I don't know, being a New Yorker, there's just something about, what do you mean minor? What do you mean minor prophet? Like this idea that there are these prophets, there's this collection of scriptures that we find in the Old Testament, in the time and history of ancient Israel, that is these small collections. They're small scrolls, sometimes between like 4 to 15 chapters that are just describing these writings of the prophets. Now, if you're like me and you've kind of grown up in Western media, a lot of connotations can come up when you hear the word prophet. I think of Harry Potter and like the child of the prophecy. I think of like the Arthurian legends of King Arthur and like his prophecies. And why don't we just call it out? How do you guys understand prophecy? What is prophecy? You can just yell it out. Telling the future, yeah. I think that's probably the main way that we think of prophecy, or at least I think of prophecy when I think about my Western imagination, which is like, there's a crystal ball, or someone like throws a bunch of dice or does whatever, and then suddenly they know what's going to happen in the future. And that is part of what prophets do, especially in the Old Testament. But prophets were much more, I would say, if you look at the scriptures and you read that text, and it's a word jumble of a bunch of names that we gave Devin the hard reading today and made him read the one with all the names. It's like really baked into a time and place of events that are happening contemporary to that prophets. See, what prophets do is, yes, they promise this future that is coming one day. But what they're also doing is they're talking about what God's activity and attitude is to the current events of their time, with the kings that are living, with the events that are happening, and prophets actually end up they embody the will and activity of God in their lifetime. And I'm going to be honest, Hosea's activity, embodying the attitude and activity of God, is very strange. And it can honestly be very abrasive to contemporary readers like me. It's a strange thing. Go and marry a promiscuous woman. It is not easy to read that, right? It's not easy to hear. What does this all mean? Well, my hope is that as we read Hosea, as Hosea embodies the activity and attitude of God in his time, we would embody the activity and attitude of God in our time, because these ancient problems are modern problems, because they're human problems. That's a saying of a close friend of mine, Calvin Chan. Ancient problems are modern problems, and they are human problems. So with that, let's explore what God is saying in the life of Hosea and as Hosea writes these scriptures for us. Would you pray with me as we explore this text together? God, thank you for your scriptures to us, that you revealed your will through the lives of these ancient writers. I pray that as we read them, we would not hold them as a distance, as if they do not apply to us or they are from a time far gone and bygone, but rather that they are your voice breaking out both in that time and this time. So Lord, awaken us to your scripture as we see what you're saying today. In your name we pray, amen. Amen. This is how Hosea begins his scroll, his prophecies. The word of the Lord that came to Hosea, son of Beeri, during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and during the reign of Jeroboam, son of Jehoash, king of Israel. We start with this very strange kind of list of kings. There are 4 Judean kings, and there's only one Israelite king. Now, what we have to understand is that the time we are in Israelite history is a moment of, it's actually like, they're doing great politically, honestly. It's a time of real economic affluence, and it's a time of like political prosperity. They are mostly in pretty stable political alliances with the Assyrian and Babylonian kind of contemporaries. Egypt is not encroaching on their territory. They're doing great. And these kings are just living and doing relatively well. But it was also a time of kind of complexity. You know, during this time, it's a part of this moment in Israelite history where Israel had moved from being one nation ruled by a singular king and a kind of singular style of worship to 2, to Israel and Judah. And it also was a moment of kind of a centralization of power into kings and queens. When Israel first started, they had a village-based system where kind of people would gather in village communities that were locally kind of governed by synagogues and all these things. But during these reigns, we have these kings that come and centralize power. And a part of what happens when they need to centralize power is they rely on the powers around them, on the Assyrians, on the Babylonians, on the Canaanites. And through a series of treaties, the way that they've consolidated power is by mixing cultures, taking the cultures that were surrounding them, the styles of worship, the value systems of these allies, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, and kind of fusing them with their own culture. It's this time of assimilation. And what happens is during this time, the worship of the founding deity of the scriptures, of Yahweh, begins to slowly fade into kind of the background of just one of many gods. Whether it be Baal, whether it be Asherah, there are all these other competing values. And this is what Hosea kind of writes next. So this is the political story. See, when the Lord began to speak through Hosea, the Lord said to him, "Go and marry a promiscuous woman and have children with her. For like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord." It's a strange invitation. to enter into this broken marriage that seems like it'll have no hope. Now, a couple things that we need to understand is, in Western writing, we generally like linear timelines. We like to kind of write in a way that is, January, February, March, April. Time kind of goes on like this. Hebrew ancient writing does not have that temperament. It does not care to kind of explain things from point A to point Z, you know what I mean? It's not linear. Likely what's happening here, in the scriptures, in the Levitical law, it's actually, you're not supposed to really go marry someone who is engaging in illicit sexual activity. That's actually something that's like written out in the scriptures. So likely what's happening here is Hosea is kind of prophetically interpreting the events of his life. And he's looking back on the story of his marriage and how he felt called to enter into this marriage with this woman, Gomer. And there was all of this brokenness. There was betrayal. There was abandonment. There was adultery. There was affairs. And it was this incredibly broken story. And what Hosea's task is as a prophet is, God, what are you saying and doing in my life? And how is that story relevant for me? And how is it relevant for the community around me? See, this story that he's interpreting, marry a promiscuous woman, have children with her. This is what it means. For like an adulterous wife, this land is guilty of unfaithfulness to the Lord. See, the primary problem that Hosea identifies, both in his life and in the life of the community he's living, it's not actually greed. The current contemporary time of the ancient Israelites, it had a time of incredible wealth disparity. Yes, there was a lot of economic affluence, but the way it looked like was the wealthiest were becoming more wealthy and the poorest were becoming poor. We're really lucky that that is an ancient problem. Sadly, it's not. Like my friend Calvin says, it was an ancient problem because it was a modern problem because it's a human problem. See, it's this moment, it's not greed though, he doesn't call that out. He calls it unfaithfulness. Because what God is saying through Hosea in this moment is that it is this relationship that has been betrayed. Yes, greed is horrible. Yes, idolatry is horrible. Yes, all of these things of acting unneighborly, ungenerously, unkindly to your neighbors is wrong. But what is at the root of it is a lack of fidelity, a lack of faithfulness to your first priority, which is the worship and devotion of God. And just as his wife was unfaithful to him, the Israelite community has proven itself to be unfaithful to God. The problem is the priority which has been lost, unfaithfulness. See, this story continues to go on with Hosea's children. And this is what it says. So Hosea married Gomer, son of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to Hosea, call him Jezreel, because I will soon punish the house of Jehu for the massacre at Jezreel, and I will put an end to the kingdom of Israel. In that day, I will break Israel's bow in the valley of Jezreel. Okay. We're going to get very nerdy for a little bit because this is just going to be historical. If you are someone that likes like a Song of Ice and Fire or medieval fantasy, I behoove you to read 1st and 2nd Kings. It's a crazy story of kings and queens dying, assassination plots, all these crazy things. Okay, what is this talking about? Jezreel is a place in the northern kingdom of Israel. In the northern kingdom of Israel. Now, the house of Jehu, who's Jehu? So, in the story of Israel, there are a king and queen named Ahab and Jezebel. Ahab and Jezebel were known for actually a lot of political success. They were powerful leaders. They kind of consolidated power. They did all the things that we're talking about here. But they were also incredibly evil. They did a lot of horrible, unjust things. They killed prophets. It wasn't even just for consolidating power. There's this one story where they're next door to their palace, there is a vineyard, and they really like the vineyard, and they're like, we want that vineyard. But the owner of the vineyard, Naboth, says, I don't want to sell you this vineyard. This is my land. I want to live here. So they do what any sensible person would do, and they kill Naboth. And it's horrible. And it's this horrible story of like a person with all the power in the world, like using it for the most petty, stupidest thing to just get a vineyard. Luckily, we don't live in a time anymore where people with power use it for petty reasons, right? We don't use it where systems of justice are kind of used that way. Luckily, we don't. And sadly, we do. Because it was an ancient problem, and it's still a modern problem because it's a human problem. This problem of unfaithfulness to our first calling, a God that invites us to love one another, to seek justice. But so Ahab and Jezebel are really evil. So you know what happens actually? Jehu shows up. Jehu's a military commander. And like Jehu is the hero. God actually comes through a prophet named Elisha and invites Jehu to go and end the line of Ahab and say, hey, we need to actually depose this lineage. Like, this lineage is just doing evil and evil. And it's like the story of a hero, Arthur, a prophecy, right? It's like, yes, we did it. We have someone. So Jehu goes and he actually deposes this line. He ends up defeating in battle the king of Ahab, the sons of Ahab. And it's a story where, like, yes, we did it. Justice has been done. We, like, saved the day. Naboth has been avenged. But you know what's so crazy? Jehu from there is like, okay, we got rid of the problem. Like, we dealt with the problem of injustice. Justice has been dispensed. But now Jehu's like, well, I'm king. I get to be king now. He's been decided as king. But he starts getting worried about kind of the remaining survivors of this land. So there are 70 children. There's 70 kind of descendants of the household of Ahab. And Jehu basically like forces, he intimidates people in the officials of this place in Jezreel to kill an entire household of people. So 70 people are killed because of Jehu's insecurity. Jehu himself doesn't do it, but he kind of threatens. He uses this very, he basically says like, hey, I killed these kings, you better put the new kings on the throne because I'm gonna go fight them. So it's this moment of like, he's threatening the Jezreel people to be like, hey, you better deal with this problem or I'm gonna come deal with you. So the Jezreel people, they kind of like, okay, we're scared, we don't wanna die. So they end up betraying their own household and they kill these people. So Jehu shows up to Jezreel and it's this really strange moment where it becomes a cover-up, where he's like, well, you know what? I never told you to kill those people, so now I'm going to kill you. And Jezreel becomes this place of an insane massacre, where priests are killed, where officials are killed, government officials, and it's this massive bloodletting of what was meant to be this dispensation of justice against the lineage of Ahab, becomes this moment of more injustice as another leader uses a system of justice to actually to weaponize it and to use it to incite violence upon people. Luckily, this is no longer a problem today, where systems of justice are used to hurt and harm even the people that are innocent. Luckily, that doesn't happen today. But what was an ancient problem is a modern problem, because it's a human problem. See, what Hosea is revealing in naming his son Jezreel, naming him after this horrible, bloody moment in Israel's history is this. Go to the next slide. Even in humanity's attempts at justice, because of our unfaithfulness, because of our motives that are not focused, we end up creating injustice. Even in the kind of centralization of power, like we're making progress, we're becoming more economically affluent, we're doing all this. Even at our attempts at good things, we end up creating evil, whether that be on purpose or accidentally, because of these mixed motives. Jehu was meant to be someone that was dispensing justice, that kind of ending this unjust situation, and instead he becomes just another cog in the machine of the consolidation of power of power being lusted after and sought. And I am sure that, like, even in our own lives, we start something for a good reason, whether it's the career we go into. But slowly, maybe our motives start to change a little bit. Yes, I went into this career because I wanted to help people. But I also kind of want money. Or I also kind of want to be really successful. So we start to kind of cross morals a little bit. Our convictions start to kind of fall down. This thing that we originally set out to do becomes actually a vehicle for something not good. You know, I won't lie, churches are very capable of this as well. We want to reach more people. We want to grow. We want to do all this stuff. But it's easy for churches to kind of lose sight. It's easy for me as a leader to lose sight of what we are here to do, to bear witness to the kingdom of God, to seek the flourishing of communities, to love God and to love people. And in the midst of all of our mixed motives, we end up hurting and harming people around us rather than seeking to do the good we originally sought out to do. Jezreel, the sign of humanity's complex relationship to goodness, to justice, to evil and injustice. See, this is what Hosea does next. This is where it gets rough. I won't lie, it gets rough for me. See, Gomer conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. Then the Lord said to Hosea, call her Lo Ruhamah, which means not loved. Can you imagine being that daughter? Like every day being called, not loved. Come and eat. Come inside. Not loved. But it's this identity that is given to this young daughter. And the reason that Hosea gives this name to her or identifies her this way is because this is what God is saying through this action. For I will no longer show love to Israel, that I should at all forgive them. It is a sobering moment. And particularly for people that, you might be here and maybe you're not a Christian or you're still trying to discover what faith is. And you're like, is this what God is like? Is this what God is like? Like, is he kind of mean? Or kind of withdrawing love at random moments when I make mistakes? And it's a valid question because it's meant to be this moment of deep despair and fear as God seemingly withdraws love from a community. You would think the next couple of verses would help because it says, yet I will show my love to Judah and I will save them, not by bow, not by sword, not by battle, nor by horsemen and horses, but I, the Lord their God, will save them. Here's the good news in that. It's this image of faithfulness, of a God that saves not through the powers of money, not through the powers of political power, not through anything other than the love and activity of God in the world. It is God. It's not these other things. It's not God and something else. And this is important for us to know. What we rely on is God, no end. It's not God and money, God and success, God and my friendships and social circle. It's God. And we have our first allegiance and priority to the God that loves us. That's the good news of this. But the bad news is God just randomly picking and choosing who gets his love? Is it just like housing lottery? You know what I mean? Where you just submit your name and hope you get picked? Is that what's going on? What is going on here? And it's this moment, again, where we ask ourselves, this is like the dark night of the soul. And you might be in a moment in your own life where you look at your story and you look at what you're facing and you look at how you feel even about yourself. And you might say, I might as well be called not loved. This feels like my identity. This feels like my circumstances and God's heart towards me. Now, we're going to sit here for a little bit because I'm not going to give you the good news just yet. But I want us to hold that this is a lived reality of many people, including maybe you. I know it's been a lived reality of me. that I have asked myself, am I loved by God because of the things that I'm facing, because of the realities that are going on in my life? See, there's a third child that comes into play. If you look at the next slide. See, after she weaned Lo Ruhamah, not loved, Gomer had another son. Then the Lord said, call him Lo Ami, which means not my people. For you are not my people, and I am not your God. This is this is Act 2, the kind of like tragic dip. You know, what's actually even, like, we hear this and we're like, this is bad. This is bad. For the ancient readers, this would be even crazier. You know, when the nation of Israel was first established in the story of Exodus, God like came to them and was like, you are my people. I am your God. You are my beloved possession. And in these few verses that Hosea is writing about, it's almost like all of that is being struck from the record. It's like the divorce proceedings of this story of Israel and God. And you're just like, it's horrible. It's like we sit in this moment of deep fear. But we have to remember, like, this story is coming about because Gomer, this spouse, had other lovers, had other liaisons, had other people that they went to. It's a story of unfaithfulness. And this relationship is just broken and not working. And in the same way, this relationship to God that the people of Israel had is broken and not working. You know, one commentator, he actually writes about this, and he says that this is not necessarily like a judge passing a sentence, but a scientist kind of giving a statement of fact. This is someone diagnosing a disease, that Israel is not living as God's people. They are not living as if, like, the truth of the matter is that Yahweh is not Israel's God. In their propensity for injustice, in their love of money, in their obsession with power and kings and political alliances, the reality is that their lived experience is not having Yahweh as their God. So this is not necessarily God rejecting the people of Israel. It's more of the statement of fact that the Israelites have rejected God. I am not your God anymore. You do, in the same way that Gomer does not treat Hosea as her husband, the people of Israel don't treat Yahweh like their God. And in many ways, we have to kind of understand this, because oftentimes when we think about like God's involvement in the world, we think of God punishing us for what we do wrong. And like God is like Zeus, and he has like lightning bolts, and he's like chucking them, like just kind of, like throwing them into the world, like, I don't know, he's just like going nuts and like putting some spin on it and hitting people, and they're learning, like, and that's how you learn, because God punishes you. But like, when's the last time you got struck by lightning? I don't know, like maybe someone here did, but that's not usually how things go wrong, at least in my life. Like, and in the same story of Israel, like, the way things go wrong in their life is not lightning bolts. The way things go wrong is like empires come and conquer them. And these political alliances that they built up, eventually they fall apart, and then they are subjugated by these same alliances. Now, like, I don't think God is like playing a video game and is controlling the Assyrian Empire and like sending them to go and fight. Like, the Assyrians are people too, and they have free will. See, I think what's happening is here, this rejection of God, the punishment or the consequence of rejecting God is this. It's rejecting God. It's leaving the system and way of life that is defined by God. And the people of Israel, they build all these relationships and they build all these kind of secondary priorities besides Yahweh to relate to other empires, to seek money, to seek political power, to seek influence. And eventually it falls apart. And they have to live with that reality. A phrase I like to say is that part of like the consequence of sin in our life is that we have to live the lives we've created. We have to live we have to live it. And we have to live in the world that other people created. It is kind of the collective pain and suffering that we live in, that we live and experience a world of injustice and pain. We reject God with our priorities, with our decisions, with our choices. And what do we get? We get a life that is without God, that is not defined by love. We don't live by generosity, and then we don't live in a generous world. We don't live mercifully, and we don't live in a merciful world. We get what we put out. The measure that we apply to others will be applied to us. The consequence for rejecting God is rejecting God. And in the same way, Israel played these political games, and they got played by the political game. And it's this story of the consequence is the choices they've made. See, this is the nature of kind of punishment that we see, particularly in the Old Testament. Sometimes, yes, there's like divine intervention, but oftentimes, this is how justice plays out. It's the consequences of one's own actions. It's why in Deuteronomy, when this phrase of punishment is brought up, the Hebrew idea of punishment and the etymology, it actually means tends to be repeated. It's like these cycles of violence and cycles of pain and cycles of suffering where a hurt person hurts another person. A person seeking power subjugates someone, and that person seeks revenge, and we have a whole problem of evil and violence, eye for an eye, ear for an ear. This is this story that they find themselves in. A world where they have rejected God and are now at a loss. In many ways, this story reminds me of my friends and even my own story of addiction and sobriety. And if you've ever been someone that struggled with addiction, often a major turning point in people's lives is this moment where they just wake up and it's like this one moment of clarity in the midst of addiction where it's what happened? What is this life that I made? Why am I in this? And it's this moment of being at the bottom of a hole that you dug yourself and that you found yourself in. And maybe you got pushed in, or maybe you started in a system that caused you to be in that hole. But the reality is you're stuck. And what you're doing to get out is not helping. It's probably even making the situation worse. And you wake up to it. And all you can do is kind of look up and hope someone comes by to help. And that might be where you are today, where you look at the decisions you've made and kind of the life you've built for yourself. And if you're honest, you're like, man, I don't like living this life. And in my own decision making, in my own wisdom, I have not ended up in a place that I thought I would end up. And it's this moment where we are grappling with the fact that maybe we've rejected the God that promised love, mercy, forgiveness, and grace. And as we've rejected that, now we experience a world that feels absent of love, forgiveness, mercy, and grace. The promise of Hosea is that it turns around. And this is what Hosea ends up saying. See, despite this dark night of the soul, despite this brokenness, he writes this: "Yet the Israelites will be like the sand on the seashore, which cannot be measured or counted. In the place where it was said to them, 'You are not my people,' they will instead be called children of the living God. The people of Judah and the people of Israel will come together, and they will appoint one leader and will come up out of the land. For great will be the day of Jezreel." Hosea points this coming day where someone will show up. Someone will show up and somehow be the rope that pulls us out of that hole, that pulls Israel out of this hole. About 600, 800 years later after there is written, a man named Jesus is born. And Jesus is prophesied. He's promised to be the Son of God, God in the flesh. And what's so strange about how Jesus lives is he does not free Israel by engaging in the political alliances or the money games or the power plays that has plagued Israel for centuries. Instead, he lives a life of generosity and grace, proclaiming himself as the way, truth, and life, the Son of God here to save the world. And when those political powers, whether it be the religious system of his time in the Jewish temple or it be the Roman Empire itself, when they turn to stamp him out, he does not take up arms. He does not seek new treaties or alliances to kind of protect himself. But he allows the violence of the world, the cycles, the punishment of the rejection of God, he allows it to consume him. But in the hope of the gospel, we are told that Jesus rises from the dead. And in the love and power of God, even the gravest injustice, even the greatest evil is reversed. And Jesus is raised back to life, promising us that the stories that have defined our life, the injustice that we have both participated in and have experienced ourselves, will not have the final word, and that there is hope for the future. Hosea points us to this. He points us to hope in Jesus, his life, death, and resurrection, the one who will come to end these cycles, to in himself absorb the injustice, the unmercy, the unlove of the world, and to forge a new path over. You know, Hosea does this thing which it like almost kind of, I don't cry often, but it almost makes me tear up. The immediate verse that he writes out of this is this. Look at this next slide. He says to the people of Israel, he says to turn to one another and to say this: say to your brothers, my people. Say to your sisters, my loved one. These names that they were holding on to, these identity markers, not my people, not loved. Somehow, Hosea is promising there will be a day where we can turn to one another and confidently proclaim, my loved one, my people, that the feelings and fear that we have that we are not loved and that we are not God's people and that God is not a God for us, that day will end. Because the one we have been waiting for who will end these cycles has come. And the promise of the scriptures, the promise of the gospel, and the promise of the resurrection of Jesus is that hope has come. And yes, we are waiting for a day when these ancient problems can stop being modern problems, and perhaps these problems can no longer be human problems. We're still waiting for that to be finalized. But in the resurrection of Jesus, we have this moment in history that we can point to and promise to ourselves and promise to one another because of the love of God, that we are God's people, that we are God's beloved. This is the story of Hosea and the story of Jesus. It is this: we were unfaithful, that humanity, both as us as a collective and as us individuals, we were unfaithful. We had mixed priorities. We had God and something else. We had maybe just a way of life that we built that had nothing to do with what God invited us to. We were unfaithful, and we have to come to terms with that. We have to realize the holes we've digged ourselves in, both as individuals and collectively. But in this story, we are promised that God remains faithful, and that through Jesus we are God's beloved